Our topic for today is why the Miriam become lepers when the cloud parted from above the what did Aaron do and why? For the past 11 weeks, we have been discussing the series God is particular. And we've learned a lot about God in terms of the fact that He is particular about the things that we do, the instructions He gives us, and His expectations, in that He expects us to be obedient towards Him and then to pay heed to His way. This week, we are learning another lesson about how God is particular about the actions we take, the decisions we make, our thoughts, our intentions, and then the things that we do in our hearts. And our Bible text that we're reading for this is Numbers chapter 12. So if you all kindly turn with me to Numbers chapter 12. So we'll take it verse by verse. Verse 1, Numbers chapter 12, verse 1 says, And Miriam and Aaron spake against Moses because of the Ethiopian woman whom he had married. for he had married an Ethiopian woman. So as we can see, Miriam begins a conversation. Bible commentary tells us that Miriam begins a conversation with Aaron about the Ethiopian woman whom Moses had married. Now, some people say she could have been someone else, a new wife, other than Zipporah that Moses married. Other Bible commentators say that it could have been Zipporah because she was that skin. They were still making reference to the same person. Now, as they begin this conversation, they are criticizing her skin, which is something that she does not have control over. God created her that skin, and certainly it shouldn't have been something that came up in the conversation for people such as Miriam and Aaron. And then chapter 2 says, and they said that the Lord indeed spoken only by Moses, had he not spoken also by us, and the Lord heard. So in verse 2, we see them challenging Moses' authority and asking whether the Lord has spoken only through Moses. Now, as we all know, Aaron is the high priest for the Israelites, and Miriam is a prophetess. Now, between the three siblings, Aaron, Miriam, and Moses, they were the leadership that helped with the deliverance of the Israelites from Egypt. And now these same people are questioning Moses' authority, which is very unfortunate. And they continue to say this. Now the man Moses, verse 3 says, now the man Moses was very meek above all men which were upon the face of the earth. So verse 3 tells us that Moses is a very humble man. And as we all know, God knows Miriam and Aaron depict to us what happens in every human family. There's always quarrels, there's always misunderstanding, and people criticize each other. Now I can imagine Miriam, who was the one who put Moses in a basket with her mother, and then they put him on the riverbed, and then he's found by Pharaoh's younger sister. This same Miriam, seeing her younger brother now rising, same with Aaron, they see him rising to become the leader amongst the Israelites. And that brings negative emotions and negative thoughts into their hearts. And as you can see, the criticizing Moses' new wife was just a way to begin the conversation. As we all know what it does, we start on a lighter note, and then as the conversation goes on, we bring out our true intents and our purposes. Now, Aaron was the high priest of Israel, which means he had a leadership position among the Israelites. So was Miriam. She was also a prophetess, which means the Lord spoke to her, and then she spoke to them. Despite the authority that they had, they were still criticizing Moses. Now we will ask ourselves why? Because of jealousy and envy of his leadership and of the role that he had. But verse 3 tells us that Moses is a humble man. So you ask ourselves, if God knew them very well, we would say that God made the right choice amongst the three siblings, selecting Moses to be the one through which he chose to lead the Israelites out of Egypt, and the one whom he chose to speak to directly, and who had a greater authority amongst the three siblings. This goes also to show how wise our God is in all his steps and all his actions. And we're told that he's humble. Now, what do we also learn from this? Can God say the same thing about us? Can other people say the same thing about us? That we are also humble in what we do. In our homes, in our workplaces, in our church, wherever we find ourselves. Can people look at us and actually say that we are humble and that we have humility? Bible tells us that Jesus had all power and all authority, and yet he humbled himself even to the point of death, when he was slaughtered like a lamb led to the slaughterhouse. Can it also be said of us, despite the positions we hold in church, we can be pastors, elders, mathematical leaders, or hold special roles in our families, family heads, or hold special positions. Can it also be said of us that we are also humble? And then verse 4, I'm reading verse 4 to 5. It says, and the Lord spake suddenly unto Moses, and unto Aaron, and unto Miriam, Come out we into the tabernacle of the congregation. And they three came out. And the Lord came out in the pillar of cloud and stood in the door of the tabernacle and called Aaron and Miriam, and they both came forth. Now, this is a very interesting concept. Imagine us living in our homes. When we were younger, my brother and I, or my sister, we are misbehaving. You know how our parents do. Your parents come and call all of you and line you up and have a conversation with you or remind you. And this goes to show the close relationship they had with God. Immediately the thing happens, God hears it, God sees it, and he takes immediate action. Now let's start with God hearing it. It goes to tell us, as we all know, that everything we do, the Lord is watching. Everything we say, the Lord sees. And interestingly, Moses did not have to fight for himself. A lot of the time, things go wrong in our lives and we take it upon ourselves to fight on our own behalf. Instead of leaving it to our God to fight for us, Moses did not speak or say anything. He didn't hear, but the Lord heard, and the Lord fought for him. The other thing we also need to know is that it says, immediately the Lord called, suddenly the Lord called them out. God, in a lot of cases, as we have seen from the Bible, even in for this particular speech, he takes immediate actions. And there are other times when he's gracious and he's merciful, and it takes him a while to remind us. But in this very instance, he calls them out immediately to have a conversation with them. And when the Bible says he came down in a pillar of cloud. I'm going forward to verse 6 to 9. It reads, and he said, this is the Lord speaking to them, hear now my words. If there be a prophet amongst you, I, the Lord, will make myself known unto him in a vision and will speak through him in a dream. My servant Moses is not so, who is faithful in all my house. With him will I speak mouth to mouth, even apparently and not in dark speeches. And the similitude of the Lord should he behold. Wherefore then were ye not afraid to speak against my servant Moses? And the anger of the Lord was kindled against them, and he departed. The word of the Lord has come. God has called them. Immediately he's having a conversation with them. Now, Miriam and Aaron were earlier on criticizing Moses' authority over them and authority over Israel. And the Lord comes clearly to emphasize that indeed, he, the Lord, is the one who has given Moses this authority by telling them that he speaks directly to Moses. Now, as we know, God speaks to various people through different means, through visions, like Joseph, for example, had dreams. That was the way God spoke to him. There were others who received visions, like Daniel. The Lord spoke to him through visions. And Miriam and Aaron, I'm sure, God had also spoken to them through visions and dreams. But the Lord is emphasizing here that, yes, he is the one who has elected Moses. He is the one who chooses to speak to Moses directly, which shows that indeed the Lord has selected him and he had a special place in God's heart. God has a special relationship with Moses that they cannot take away from him. And to criticize Moses about this meant that they were actually criticizing God, which they should have known being a priest and a prophetess in Israel. So again, that also makes us mindful or ask ourselves a question. When we are also speaking out against leadership within our churches, how do we go about it? We have pastors, we have elders, we have other church members, we have friends within the church. When something goes wrong, even if nothing has gone wrong, how do we speak out about these people, knowing that it's the Lord who has appointed them and elected them to play this specific role within His church? What authority do we have to question what God has ordained? And we must find a better approach to managing conversations and situations in the Lord's house. And the Lord also says that Moses is faithful in his house. Like I said earlier, the Lord knows them all. He knows their hearts. We're told that Moses is humble in verse 3. God knows his humility. And he knows the attitude in which Moses will have towards God in carrying out all the instructions that the Lord had given him and in obeying the word of the Lord. And for this particular reason, God was proud of Moses. Now we go on, and God has explained that he speaks to him face to mouth to mouth. Even though Moses had not seen him face to face, so as to know, the Bible says that no man can behold the Lord and live. So he did not see the Lord face to face, but he had one of the closest relationships with God that anyone else in the Bible has ever had. And we're told the Lord was angry and he departed from them. Now, why would God depart from us also as we are learning today? When we make wrong choices or we sin, we push God away from us and we put distance between us and God. When God departs, evil. It is evil that we do in our lives. When God departs from us, it means that we have opened the doorway for the enemy to come in and take control or to have an influence over our lives. So we must be careful of our words, our actions, our thoughts, the intentions and motives of our hearts, and we do not push the Lord away from us, or we do not sin, and then also God departs from us. So verse 10 to 12, it says, the cloud departed from the tabernacle, and behold, Miriam became leprous. And behold, Miriam became leprous. And Aaron looked upon her, and behold, she was leprous. And Aaron said unto Moses, alas, my Lord, I beseech thee, lay not the sin upon us, wherein we have done foolishly, and wherein we have sinned. So as you can see, let me take the paragraph verse 12. It says, let her not be as one dead of whom the flesh is half consumed, when he cometh out of his mother's womb. We're told that the cloud departed from them, which means the Lord had left their presence. And God left in anger. He didn't give them an opportunity to defend themselves. The same way sometimes our parents also behave towards us. When we have done wrong, we are not given the opportunity to defend ourselves because clearly we are in the wrong. And in this way, the Lord departs, and we're told that Miriam becomes leprous and becomes as white as snow. From the way the text reads, it seems as if even though Miriam became leprous, she was not aware herself until Aaron pointed it out. Now, the Bible commentary teaches us that leprosy is one of the diseases that closely resembles sin. Now, how is this? Leprosy creeps up on an individual. You contract it, and they say it shows on your skin like a rash, maybe a small mosquito bite, something small. And then as time goes on, it grows within your body, and rapidly, speedily, it spreads through all the parts of your body. And then it begins to kill your nerves, and the various nerves within your body. So a leprous person can actually put their hand with fire and they will not feel it because their nerves are dead. Or the nerves connection to the brain is dead, and so they do not feel it physically. And that is how sin also operates within our lives. It starts gradually, one small thing at a time, and then it consumes your whole body, your mind, your spirit, and your soul. How is someone triggered by anger and all of a sudden they slap someone or they kill another person? Because it's a gradual thing. Sin creeps upon us and then it can take over our entire body. And this is what happened to Miriam. And leprosy represented sin, or it was a metaphor for sin. So clearly we can see the similarity between the two. Miriam is also said to become white as snow. As we all know, whenever Moses went to have a conversation with the Lord, or the Lord gave him instruction, Moses came down with the glory of the Lord shining around him. And Bible commentators have said that Miriam became quiet, not with glory as Moses had, but rather as a sign of her sin and the shame of the action she had taken in gossiping about her father and starting a conversation that was negative and showed the negative intentions of her heart. And so we learn that we ought to be careful with our actions and our words. Leprosy came upon Miriam because the Lord was angry with her because of the words she had spoken about her own mother, because of the words she had spoken about the leadership of Israel. And we also need to be careful that our words, our actions, our thoughts, and our intentions do not go directly against people whom God has appointed within to play a specific role within his house. And then we're told that Aaron immediately pleads to Moses and asks Moses to beseech the Lord on their behalf. Now, this is also very interesting because Aaron and Miriam were the same people who were arguing about Moses' authority earlier in this chapter. Now, if Aaron thought that he had the same authority or the same relationship with the Lord, why is he now going to beseech Miriam and Moses to plead on their behalf? It goes to prove that deep down within their hearts, they knew that there was a difference between their relationship with God and Moses' relationship with God. Others have also asked, why is it that only Miriam was the only one who became leprous and not Aaron? Now, Bible commentary teaches us that it is the high priest within Israel who will assess an individual and diagnose them of leprosy. And Aaron was the high priest. It would have been impossible for Aaron to diagnose himself of leprosy. Secondly, Aaron was also the high priest, which meant that he represented the people to God. Now, if Aaron had been struck with leprosy, technically he would have been defiled, or he would have become unclean. And thus, how can he, the high priest, represent the people before the Lord? So it was only Miriam who became leprous. Immediately, Aaron repents and he sees the wrong in his actions. Seeing his sister become leprous, immediately tells Aaron that I also should have been in this condition. The Lord could also have struck me, but he has been merciful unto me. So immediately he's repentant and then he pleads and seeks for forgiveness. Sometimes the Lord points out our sins to us and we are not repentant immediately. We harden our hearts and we do not listen to the prompting of the Holy Spirit. It's important that just as Aaron did, when the Lord speaks to us, when he points to us our wrongdoing, we also ensure that immediately we go back on our actions, we go to the Lord and seek forgiveness and ask for his cleansing for our sins and our righteousness. And the Bible tells us that he's faithful and just to forgive us. Verse 13 says that Moses cried unto the Lord, saying, heal her now, O God, I beseech thee. Moses indeed had a good heart. For you and I, only God knows how we would have reacted. He didn't know about what they had done earlier until the Lord called them and pointed it out. For some of us would have been angry for days. Our immediate thought would have been, okay, I'll pray for Miriam, but in my heart, I wish she suffer a little, maybe about 24 hours or a few hours before the leprosy goes away, so that she feel the error of her transgression, or she feel some of the pain that I have gone through being here. Because certainly Moses must have been hurt. That was his own sickness. But he did not think about how they had offended him or how they had hurt him. His focus was on the fact that he wants his sister to be well. Now, you and I also need to be conscious of our actions. The Lord is gracious and merciful to us. When we seek forgiveness, the Bible says immediately we confess, he forgives us and he cleanses us. When others also confess, or when others apologize to us, do we hold grudges against them? Do we hold an unforgiving heart, or we are also able to let it go? And certainly, we cannot do this on our own. It's by the grace and the mercy of the Lord. So we need to seek the Lord's face when others also wrong us, so that we are able to also forgive them immediately for their actions against us. So Moses beseeches the Lord immediately. And the word the Bible says, it says, feel her now. He's pleading to the Lord on her behalf. Do we also plead to the Lord on behalf of people who have wronged us, or even people we dislike, or even people who may consider us as their enemies? Do we beseech the Lord on their behalf? That is the Christian thing to do. That is the godly thing to do, because we love them as we love ourselves, and also because we realize that we are also sinners just like them. We are also undeserving of God's grace, but the Lord is merciful unto us. So we must also show the same mercy unto other people. I read chapter 14 to 16, and it says, and the Lord said unto Moses, if her father had but spit in her face, should she not be ashamed 7 days? Let her be shut out from the camp 7 days, and after that, let her be received in again. And Miriam was shut out from the camp 7 days, and the people journeyed not, so Miriam was brought in again. And afterwards, the people from Hazarah and fished in the wilderness of Paran. Amen. So as you can see, Moses beseeches the Lord, but as we all know, we can ask the Lord for forgiveness, but we still reap the consequences of our actions. So she has been healed, but yet she will be set away from the camp for 7 days, so that she receive the consequences of her actions. And also, it was to serve as a sign to the Israelites as well. Now, this was a public sin, because Miriam had to be set away from the camp publicly. So you can imagine how all the Israelites will ask, first of all, how did she become leprous? And why are we now setting her out of the camp? It will become a lot of conversations going around in Israel. And we all know, ever since they left Egypt, it had been one complaint after the other against Moses and against Aaron and the leadership of Israel, whom God had appointed. This was also to serve as a warning to the Israelites as well, that anything you say, the Lord hears. Anything negative you say, God sees and he can take action immediately. And so in that way, it was also to prompt them and also to prompt us that everything that we do, the Lord sees, and we need to be cautious and mindful about this. Now, she still reaps the consequences of her actions because she has been set apart outside the camp, and we're told the whole of Israel did not move until she came back. And lots of the time, we feel that when we sin or we do something wrong against the Lord, it will affect just us. But that isn't the reality. Sin always affects other people. It can affect your family, it can affect your spouse, it can affect your children, it can affect other members within your church. Sin always has a negative effect on other people. So we also need to be mindful of the decisions we take when we are tempted to do the wrong thing and ask ourselves, this thing that I'm doing, I'm doing it to sin against God. And then also, what will also be the effects on myself and on others around me? And certainly, we need to be wise and ask the Lord to give us grace to make the right decision. So the entire camp was affected by Miriam's decision. And in the same way, our actions also affect other people. So we need to be mindful of this. So that brings us to the end of our annual session. We'll take general comments before we go on to the questions for today. Any comments about the lesson that has been studied, and then we move on to our 4 key questions.
I think that is too much. I didn't want some clarification here. When we read, anybody can do it, Exodus 2, 18 and 21. When we read Exodus 2, 18 and 21, The pensioners symbolize what is named as revenue. REUEL. Then we come to Exodus 4:18 and then 18 to this. You mentioned Jethro. So I want us to have order Jethro is the same as revenue. REUEL. Whether it's the same person, because it says Rebel gave his daughter to Moses, and then you come to this text that you don't mention it. Zipporah and I want to reflection from there.
And then
It is the same person. Look over the text. Enter to 18 and 21. Mention Rebel. Then there comes 4, 18 and 22. The text is my question.
Can anyone assist us?
Let's after the question.
Okay, so we'll take our first question. It says, how do you regard the leadership of the church? Even when you feel or think that they have acted wrongly?
Go to the question. I want to make a comment. It said when we read Michael verse 6, Miriam could have talked about how God has made them. Miriam, Moses, to deliver the from the Egypt. You should be aware that God is God. God who has everything. That mindset of God was the one who even led them to deliver the Israel. Now, brought Miriam about who God is, who Moses is to God. But I think he forgot as a human being. Also, secondly, usually when Miriam was actually making the argument, was complaining. Even got involved because he thought Moses would come to me for advice before choosing the 70 elders to meet God in the mountain. So everyone thinking that Moses was listening to the Bible. And I think coming like they did together. I think that was what brought Aaron to join Miriam to accuse Moses of
Okay, and then secondly, when the Aaron and the sisters spoke against Moses, see, Moses did, and then later, Moses did not marry them, but pleaded God for forgiveness on their behalf. You see, at times, some of us take the little statement somebody makes against us, we get offended at once. But here, like Moses will tell you, yes, you always want to speak against me. Now you are taking the punishment. Like that was not the way. He was right, he rather pleaded on behalf of so that in a church, in a society, everybody will find ourselves. Let us look at this very important area so that we learn to forgive. Instead of looking for opportunity to also retaliate, just pay for that person and then forgive them. This is very important.
Let's do the children of when Aaron made a golden calf, Moses came to God to speak between God and Aaron. Since God was angry with Aaron, now Moses is on God's God. Aaron should have thought about what Moses has done for him. Why? Because of envy, upset, and jealousy of the the very actually not about Moses leadership or management, but the monopoly of using elders by himself. That was where they had the issue. Moses. Why do Moses alone choose the people that God wants them to have? Why? I don't think that God is what about us? So they forgot that God was the one who chose Moses, who speak to Moses. Sometimes in our life, we might forget that we have leaders. That's the hierarchy. Some are higher, some are. When you try to equal with them, that's what a mistake. That's what you do. You want to equal with Moses. You are God has made has given everyone a position. When every someone to God what to do, about family. That's why you know should have taught what Moses did. When he did the good that God wanted to do.
You see, anytime you see people who are humble, you shouldn't take them for the right. You shouldn't take them for why they are humble, is they are weak, so they can do anything or get them. The fact that this was humble doesn't mean that that was how God moved to move the family others. So when somebody is humble, don't just take it for granted. Okay, like anywhere we find ourselves, oh, this person, why did I tell this? We will not respond or will not do anything. No, the fact that it's so pride and happiness is big, but it's because God has made me so. So we should be the person that is.
Thank you for that. Back to our question. The first one is how do you define the leadership of the church? Even when you think or feel that they have acted wrongly. So let's take a practical example. We are within the church, and maybe we generally we hear that the church board has taken a decision, or maybe our several elders have taken a decision and we disagree. How would we regard their leadership based on what we've learned today? Even if we think or feel, now it says think or feel because that may be your personal opinion. They may not have acted wrongly, but that is to you. You think that they have acted wrongly. But let's take it that it's either your opinion or they have acted wrongly. How should we regard the leadership in such an instance?
Even the thought of care or not gender. It's very good of them. And also, we just try and have patience. But I wonder,
Anyone else? Yes.
Wasn't go back to right about one day she was trying to pick up that leadership challenging. You see, anytime the most important thing is what is within us, what inspires us to see what we want. According to the step we are taking, what is and what are going to do or we wanted to do. So, if, for instance, what you have said, if the church leaders are taking the decision wrong, and you think that is right, what is your feeling? You go in for total displacing them, which is your motive. Or with the gospel, try to explain to love them that the thing that this decision that they is wrong. Pick it out, take a look at it. God is in heaven. If God knows your heart, that you just want to correct it, but not understand? Then it means that we are getting right. 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 So the fact is that what is within us is the problem. It's one rule that we wanted to destroy the process of the you can't do that because we are. So what is the level of awareness?
Thank you. So move on to our second question. How should such situations be approached? Very similar to the first. How should we approach such things? I think Mr. Manning has started that conversation. Is there any other contribution? How should we approach such a situation?
Society, they are everywhere. They will find a person. The developer these two concepts: constructive criticism and destructive criticism. Say constructive. Okay, there are many constructive is almost at whatever they discuss. That is constructive. But send a movie here, Mama, or more economic number. Let us say a destructive. The same thing about something necessarily. The child for the year you are. It's a you go to that find a good that person. If you are able to do that, what make the child board from down from good that with the child board. Okay, child board. That's a good idea. You then go to, if you have a research pastor around, or if there's a check pastor, and the check pastor comes from there, there's a pastor. From there, you go to the district leadership, this is a consider the same error. And then you go to the conference and so on and so on. So the question, how should such situations be approached? To approach it constructively, respectfully, and then following the churches we also that is it can pass. Unfortunately, it has not been so. Since people say, I've got the opportunity to tell you something. Somebody will come to you, what they are saying is very simple. The church leadership this, the church this, this. Then, like we are discussing, I'll just bring the person down and please, how do you approach it? You are going to meet the church, you are going to meet the elders in the army. And if the worst of it all is that before you meet the elder, you have made so many derogatory remarks and the church. So these are the things that we should be careful about. And this thing is not only about church members, leadership. Sometimes leadership like the camp of Miriam, Aaron, and Moses. They are not going to solve everything. And just tell the strength of God. That's what I think.
Thank you, Elder. So we move on to our third question. How careful should we be that we will not envy others' talents in the church? So as we saw from the text, Aaron and Miriam had a challenge with their brother's authority. And like our brother said, the monopoly he had over the camp of Israel. How careful should we be that we are also not envious or we are not jealous of somebody's talents or the gifts that the Lord has given them?
When this but there are estimates, the program, now the neighbor, the back, and a message now, and the other, the Abraham, and also to see a year from one person like self and we said. But the problem has been that so the little tourist, but you know, seven day and good is so the father asked me, it's a mystery that is that it's one of the set of the secret of one pass. The one that of one pass. The simplest area of the draw attention always start with the genesis. That's but in the same way, when we come to this talent, Moses and so Miriam and Aaron would be out with them and would be in them. And the thing of it, Aaron now a high priest. In the finality of everything, it is Jesus Christ whose position that Aaron was actually demonstrating or symbolizing. It was there in the tabernacle in heaven. Christ the high priest in the cross. Who go over it? You see, Moses, what to me, I'm sure the record, yes, to God. What to me, I'm sure is see what it's being said. As I say, it's said, and say, yeah, what is our talent? What can we do with it? That's from the first principle, and you can come out with something big out of this. The point is, your perpetual, your honor, your mom, the ideas. Eventually, when the man sent a copy to me, they said, the man had listed my name as the first person on the document management, the governance. That's what I know. What we got, we go. Meet me, minister, and I will put me minister. Because that is my business. Put me in minister, and I'm speaking in minister. I didn't come out with a good day. If I had it, I would have done it. Who did that? It's a long time. I don't know. It's not where I had it. And when the problem was under the identity, it brings animosity, unnecessary criticism, very destructive criticism here and there. And now they are, and now they are. And the talents are plenty in the church. You know, as I said, a shirt and it's not a share. Not a share, a share. They will be combined with the and then you will be a moment between of one side. Also, we are some but we cannot all do the same thing, but everybody can do something. So let's look for our talent and start improving. Helping the church with it. And you know it will grow. That's how it is. Second, I hear it, I know the plant is something that you plant but if you say just it goes out.
So we take our final question. It says, are we content with our lot in the service of God? Are we content with our lot in the service of God? I think Elder has started the conversation for us. Are we content? Any contribution?
Do we actually know our lots? Yesterday I said something. Said, somebody proposed me to be so the class right not the class start just a wood, the beer, now they are about the offer and a food. Just a more can say those hours in a chihuahua with it's not be something we know about. Say you young or will not be personally type and offering as what it is used for and use it. That should not be our business. So do we know our law? It's very, very important. Very, very. If you don't know your laws, you start believing that way. You think that anything you see should have been this or that like so I think it should start from we know our laws, identifying our laws, before we can better perform. We error and later because God did not make Moses a priest. With all the Lebanese issue, Moses was out of just mediating and telling people it makes sense between God and people.
Thank you.
The last one was exactly a year. Somebody did a match. As I already said, was it that's very important. You see the zeal, the vim, again, busy, the good service now. Now, after that, we know that was their last service. That is and if you only have anything in that please, our concentration should be on the word of God when we come to what is the point in the commandments? Right? The chief organizer. About God's and God's show not the path. Just the process is not about any come on, I'm going to accept it's your process. Be very careful. What it said, then organize and come savings and very well. Very well.
Not very good. So when you I think when you get when you were that's the one great I think it's forgetful. When you forget, you can do that. You build yourself. When you forget where we are, where we were, and those are where we are now. When you forget, when you think of when I envy someone, I'm not going to be, I want to see you. No, I'm not going to do different things and different ways. Where I was unique. I can't be you, can't be me. This is how you can be like me. When we are going to bring out what to do past, what God has told us, when you want to talk us, and you find our kids, and do it in a way to please God. That's where you realize God.
So, Israel. He selected the Israel as special people. And now we talk about spiritual Israel, being the remnant. And I believe, that is my belief. Yesterday I was saying that because we are the remnant, we are the remnant church, being the Seventh-day Adventists, people who uphold the laws and the principles of God. On the face of this earth, we are special people. And we are the people who should lead the whole world in this crisis time to see Jesus Christ. But we don't appear to see the Father. I'm adding to what Isaiah said. In addition to the fact that God spared even Aaron at that time, one other significance is that it was God's intention to make all the firstborn sons in Israel to be what? To be the priests, the faithful family. But because of that incident, God united all of them and selected only the Levites, but they were the only group apart from Aaron who led them, who was not involved. But still Aaron was there. And even looking at from the Aaron perspective, if you are selected as a leader of the church or a worker of the church, you should know the privilege that you have. I'm trying to pull the point. With all this, nothing happened to even look at what happened to in Israel. And then the same thing happened to Miriam. What happened? The same thing happened to Miriam. They have to wait 7 days before they come home because of Miriam. But you hear that. But there's again that is Egypt. Number 2. They can't be serious. Some prayer in as they need I am not a human. I will assault the other. But be very, very careful. A privilege is in the home. Some prayer or crisis. Some prayer and the chance to fire to the person. Certainly, I believe. Departmentally, I believe. The secretary, the personal entry, the advertisement, the Sabbath. Just then, they will be sorry. What they do, they are become more something. That's what we should do now. Because we think, young thinking outside the box. But young man can say, when you go outside the box, one thing is all the time. You need to come. If the young man, say, will be our question is that. I know this is a chapter we should. But after your marriage, yesterday I was asking, Assistant Ministry Director, Women Ministry Director, Sunday School Superintendent. What are you superintendent and how are you director? With all of this COVID period, who is brainstorming to move the church forward out of this? What will go that account? When you mean this Roman weapons, there's a video. The fear of the other man, the fear itself to start up the other. So if you are not careful, but a good fear like yourself, that really if you are not careful, nobody is here, who will be done and the spell error. Please, there are less error. On one time, it's very careful. If you are not going to be a player, I said, Basimu, and Siasini, and more than one so catch something because they to me rather than to do this. Otherwise, it will be like miracle because of the bottom. That the banana is because of you, a tumor and a devil of the Immanuel Church is still marking that. This is very real spiritually. It is near 1 year you are just waiting. Now, what I mean is, that's it. Your master did this. If something happened, now, come on, say the error of the air. Make us just the year because of myself, we have been paid for policy. So, what I'm saying here is to do that, then I will be back. Beyond that, there will be no mercy.
Thank you. Thank you all for that. Now, the book of now, most common council events, the people will say, I prostrated myself before the Lord 40 days, 40 nights. I never ate bread or drank water, and I pleaded on his behalf. And I also pleaded on behalf of Aaron because the Lord sought to destroy him. What I can't do now, who said, you know, among this kind of because there was not the president who went to the Lord and sat under his feet and take the crown with the 70 church. Oh, is that the other? Yes, yeah. If you be given a position, you should be so swallowed that said, I'll be given a position and for that matter, I can do this and all that. So, everyone points out, most specialized, it will be element. Yes, sir, you can story how you the American, you are kind of saying as a meaning to say, but what they will be out of this one, always complete the doors of the two our way. Thank you. Shall we our final?
Something I want. I also think that this is a wonderful. And looking at this, maybe that is why we are. My question is, in all leaders are people who them or know how to talk to them like that. As the pastor, who is the leader of the church in the name of God, how are you also acting? Because God is a spirit, and in that person must also be spirit and sheep. So if you also, you are not within that soup, kill yourself. Look at the way Daniel was speaking. Because the land at which, or the pot at which he was working on was wrong. You understand? And anybody comes by God, we need to talk to him as an elder. That doesn't also mean, or should I even question that? Could it be like, maybe you listen to the reading now. The pastors are beginning to know. People are building church houses, killing people, burying them under the footing. Maybe somebody got that, but that person has not experienced this kind of things we are all told that. So I think over here that as we are speaking to we maybe the church members to know how to talk to them, the leaders must also be as close as Moses, as we are saying. You see, it's not just by judgment. Moses was very strong. He was the way God just healed Miriam. It's not because Miriam was his sister, but that is Moses. Right? You know, in some way, or in some pattern, God wanted to destroy all Israel. Moses pleaded and said, what should other king do? Express Israel. You understand? This is for excellent. Why can Moses speak to God like that? Because he still himself. And this one knows that he can talk to God because he knows the skill of his son. That is the skill of whether pastor or an elder. Understand? So that if I even you yourself like that, what somebody feels, we really want to go. And that is the guidance. Right? If somebody asks sometimes I'll think you also pray for us. You should also let it's not just maybe as elder, but you must also see some people in the church. Or you see you know that is your root and that. When someone you like
Okay, so I guess
Thank you all for their contributions and their feedback. Shall we all rise?
Thou art the potter, I am the clay. Mold me and make me after thy will. While I am waiting,
We will each want to pray and commit ourselves and our entire church into the hands of the Lord. That if at any point in time we have behaved like Aaron and Miriam, that the Lord should forgive us, the Lord should purify us, the Lord should cleanse us, make us better children in Him. Shall we pray? Then we have learned how we should engage our leadership when we are not happy or we feel they have done something wrong. May the Lord help us to implement and to put into practice what we have learned this evening that will bring change and transformation in His house. Shall we pray? We've also learned that we need to be content with the talents the Lord has given us. When we are grateful and we show gratitude to the Lord, and we take His gift, we do not take His gifts for granted. We will not become envious of others. We pray that today the Lord will help each and every single one of us and the entire church as a whole, that we look upon the gifts of others with admiration, and we look upon our own gifts and search within our hearts, our minds, and beseech the Lord to know the gifts the Lord has given us, so that we can also work with them to His glory and to His honor. Shall we pray? We continue to pray that we have each been given a special role to play in the house of the Lord. The Bible tells us that each part of the body plays a specific role. So as we all stand here in the entire church, we each have a role to play, to lead others to Christ, to lead to the growth of the church. We pray and ask that God will help us each to identify and understand what God has placed upon us, and that we will live that out and we'll carry it out to the glory of the Lord. That should He come to take us home today, we can indeed say that we have fought a good fight, we have won a good race. We have been obedient to the Lord, we have done as He has expected of us. Shall we pray? We'd like to ask our elder Daniel Dansu to kindly summarize our prayers. Amen. We thank the Lord for answering prayer. Amen. Have one announcement. Maybe service begins at 7 p.m. So let's all be here and be here on the time. Thank you.